Today, I'm going to share some different collage art techniques, and I think you'll love them because they are so simple. The great news is that I'll get started on my giant oyster collage so you can see exactly how I start and what my thought process is as I go. This one has so much information in it, it really should be a workshop. I'm Jackie Bernardi, and welcome to my studio. Alrighty, as many of you know, I have been working toward starting this giant oyster collage for months now, maybe even up to a year, some would say. But I've been planning this, I've been working on it, I've got this beautiful background, and now I have the actual oyster that I'm going to be collaging completely framed out. That's what I did a couple weeks ago, and I'll link to that video. But what we're going to do today is actually start the collage. I've got all these gorgeous papers that are just ready to go up onto this collage, and what I need to do is get started. So I'm just going to be using some matte medium. I'm going to use my gel plate as a palette. I have a silicone paint shaper to move the medium around and to help press the papers down onto the canvas. I have a rubber brayer, a palette knife, and a brush in case I need to clean some things up. And of course, I have my catalyst wedge because who would I be without my catalyst wedge, right? So we're going to get started right now. I have a ton of papers spread out on the floor around the bottom of the stool where I'm sitting. I'm sorry you can't see them right now, but you'll see them as I go. Now, I'm going to be very intentional about how I start this collage. And what I mean by that is I am going to start in a very specific area first, okay? And work pretty much from the inside to the outside. It's just a great way for me to keep my brain organized as I go because this is not an ordinary collage. This is a giant collage. And it would be very easy for me to lose track and get distracted if I just start placing papers everywhere. So there's my first paper down. Yay! It's been a year in the making, and now the first paper is on the collage. Right? So as I was saying, I like to work pretty much in an orderly way as I do this. You may see me jump around a little bit from here to there, but largely I'm going to be working within a specific area of this oyster at any given time. When you're working this large, it is easy to get lost in what you're doing. So I'm going to be quite intentional. So I'm starting with this. The paper that I'm putting on right now, this is actually painted copy paper, which is very easy to tear into shapes. And that's what I've been doing. So you can see I have no shears out. I don't even have an X-Acto knife out. Today I am working purely by tearing the papers. Now, some papers are easier to tear than others. Copy paper might be the easiest to tear. It's multi-directional, so when you do start tearing, you don't get these weird strips and all that. So it's kind of a pleasure to work on. The only restriction with the copy paper is that it will not go transparent or translucent. So, although it's great for a lot of the collage work that I'm going to be doing on the oyster, it's not perfect for everything. Each paper that I use, I will try to explain the pros and cons of each so you understand what I have going on here. Okay. So now I am thinking about moving into another lobe of the oyster. Uh, I think they're called lobes. I don't really know what it's called. The meat of the oyster, just another section of it. And I'm using a different paper. Now, it's not intended that these papers will be what you see as the final result. I'm just trying to shape in the oyster with paper instead of it just being outlined with graphite like I did in that last video. And the paper that I'm using now is newsprint. It's hand-painted newsprint. And I love to use newsprint because it's very inexpensive. I have large pieces of it. I can paint a lot on it. It holds a lot. It stands up to everything well. The downside of working with newsprint is that one, It gets quite wrinkly when it gets wet. So just as you can see here, I'm really having to work to get the wrinkles out that are being caused by the matte medium. The wetness of the matte medium underneath this paper is causing it to buckle, right? So I have to really make sure that I have great adherence between the canvas and the paper, and of course the matte medium. So what I did was I put the matte medium on with the paint shaper. I then tore the paper, got it shaped correctly, put it on the wet matte medium, then went over it with some matte medium, again with the silicone paint shaper. And once I had enough medium on and I was satisfied with that, I went in with the catalyst wedge and really pressed down to get all air bubbles out, to get all buckling out so it's nice and smooth. For right now, I want nice and smooth. Later on, I may change my mind about that. But in this initial stage, this is exactly the same thing really as using the graphite last time to copy the shape of the oyster onto the canvas. This paper is not necessarily supposed to represent this part of the oyster in its final form. It's really just to help me consider the size, the shape using paper, which looks remarkably different than just using the graphite. I will go back over all these papers, but to start, I just want to have clear delineations and also get a feel for the scope and the amount of paper that I will actually need. Now, I'll tell you, standing up next to this oyster, or I should say, standing away from it, it doesn't look like it's that big, right? But in a moment, you'll see me zoom in on this oyster so you can see exactly what I'm working on in the moment. And I will tell you exactly what I'm using at that point. But what you're going to see is when I zoom in, you'll get the concept of my head, the size of my head next to this oyster. Can you see how gigantic this piece is? I mean, it's not little by any stretch. And I just wanted to point out that when you're working this large, right, it is very easy to get confused on scale, even with it drawn out. So my point here is laying the paper down as an initial base layer of paper when you're working this large is very important. And it's also a great way to use up papers that you might not ordinarily use because they're going to largely be covered anyway. So the piece of paper that I'm putting down now, this brown printed paper, that's actually deli paper. It's unwaxed deli paper. And I probably painted that piece of paper 3 or 4 years ago. It's been in my stash all that time, just waiting for its moment to shine. And so it's shining right now. Now, like the newsprint, deli paper wants to buckle when it goes over the wet medium. So just like the newsprint, I have to be certain that I have a lot of medium underneath it so that there's even coverage. Then I have to play with it, try to get some of the bubbles out and all that with the paint shaper. And then I will go back in with the catalyst wedge to make sure everything is really smooth and nice. And that way it will dry really smooth and nice. Okay. So this is a technique that you really need to practice. If you're new to collaging, this is a great way to teach yourself how to get rid of wrinkles and bubbles and how to not panic about it when it happens. All right. So again, this is another sheet of the newsprint. It's, a different painted newsprint, but it's still newsprint. And I will have to use that same technique that I just went over. Matte medium first, full coverage underneath the paper. Then the paper, go over it with whatever's left on your paint shaper. work the bubbles out, and then if you could still have wrinkles and bubbles, use a more firm device to get those out. And in this case, that is the catalyst wedge, as I'm doing here. It also helps you get rid of the excess matte medium, which of course you can still use. You just use it right off of your catalyst wedge. It's no big deal. Or your paint shaper, whatever you're using. I just love these because in both cases, they're made out of silicone. And what's nice about that is they will not dig into your papers. They won't tear your papers. Even when you go over the paper really firmly with it, it's just nice soft edges. But the genius thing about using silicone products like the wedge or the paint shapers is that the cleanup couldn't be easier. Once the matte medium or acrylic paint dries on the silicone products, you can just peel it right off. I mean, really, it couldn't be easier to clean, and that's why I love using it. I love using it over brushes. I rarely use brushes in my work. I love using it even, some of you may know this about me, but I absolutely love painting with a palette knife or using a palette knife in my artworks. Uh, but it's not nearly as easy to clean as the silicone paint shaper or the catalyst wedge. So there's a tip for you. And of course, it enhances the technique because you can use the silicone to really work out any wrinkles or anything that you don't love about the paper going onto your collage. You can usually work it out using the catalyst wedge. All right. I like how this area of the oyster is starting to fill in. And I've already said this, but I want to go back to it. I am not using scissors to cut perfect shapes so that everything goes perfectly into this oyster. I'm tearing. And the reason why that's important to me is I think it's far more visually interesting on something particularly this size to have torn edges as opposed to crisply, crisp, yeah, crisply cut edges, right? I would much rather tear off smaller and smaller pieces to get the correct shape for where I'm going than to cut one large piece and put it all down at once. Now, that's a Jackie thing. That doesn't have to be your thing, and there's nothing wrong with it if you like the nice smooth edges that shears or an X-Acto knife might create for you. That's just not the look that I'm going for with this oyster. And what I really hope is no matter what papers I use in this whole project, I really want an unctuous feel for this oyster. And I think in my mind, the way to achieve that is to build up layers and layers of different papers, of different shapes, of different sizes that are all hand torn. Now, don't get me wrong, there may be a moment in all of this where I really do need to use a blade or scissors, and it'll be just fine if I have to do that. But at least on these initial layers, using, I'm going to call them chunky pieces of paper. They're not really chunky pieces of paper, but using chunky pieces of paper is going to set the tone for a piece that carries a lot of visual interest. Every little tear of the paper, every little edge has the potential to add something incredibly unique to what's going into this collage. Now, this is true whether you're working on a giant piece like I'm working on, or if you're just working in your sketchbook, right? When you have multiple layers, it just gives the eye more information and it accepts it differently. So I love it. I love this process, and if you don't, that's okay. You can cut out pieces into the exact shapes that you want, and that might be very satisfying for you, right? It takes all types of creatives. It truly does. I'm just showing you what really works for me and some different techniques. A lot of people would be nervous. A lot of creatives might be nervous about only tearing papers. But what I would suggest is do it anyway, even if it makes you a little nervous, because you're going to learn skills by being this tactile, right? So a great example is right here. Now, this piece clearly does not fit the shape that I want it to go into. And so I'm just holding it up against the shape I want it to go in. And I'm using the sketch to guide where I tear this piece of paper so that it does fit. And that's what I just did. And now I'll just go in, put down the matte medium with the paint shaper. And then I'm going to put the paper on it. Now, for those who watched the last video where I did the sketch of the oyster onto the canvas, you know that I used graphite and then I went over the graphite with matte medium, right? And it gets very smeary. It gets very, oh, I love that quality. But I know some of you were nervous that it would continue to smear once I started the collage. And I know that because you wrote to me and you asked me about it. So when I responded, I let you know that the matte medium, so long as it covered that graphite, and even though it got smeary, so long as it covered it, once it dried, it was going to be dry and it wouldn't smear anymore. And you can see that because I am taking this very wet matte medium and I am applying it with the paint shaper over all of that graphite and none of it is smearing. Okay. It doesn't mean that some of it won't at some point. I mean, I think I was pretty careful going over all the graphite. I think I got all of it. But working this large, there's a chance I miss some, and there may be some smearing, and that'll be just fine if that happens. I'm not going to worry about it. But I wanted you to learn this because it's a great technique for you to use in your own works, no matter what the size. Put down some graphite to create a shape or a form or an outline of what you want to work on. Go over it with the matte medium in the way that I showed you in that video, right? Let it dry completely, and then you have a sketch that is going to stay there pretty much no matter what you do over it. Okay? Super cool technique. And I love that I was able to show it to you in such a huge scale so you could see that it works. If it works this large, it's certainly going to work in a much smaller scale. And I wanted you all to see that. All right? So this paper here, this again is newsprint. So I really want to work it to make sure that it's adhered well. And boy, this is bugging me. Those two little triangle shapes are really bugging me. um, anyway, uh, I just want to make sure that there's enough matte medium behind it and that before I move away from this, that I really make sure that the wrinkles are out and that every bit of that paper is attached. Now, I am going to say this. Even though these are base layers for the oyster collage, I really do want to make sure that the base layer of the paper is on as securely as possible because I have ideas of things I would like to do with these layers later on, but I do not want the canvas to get damaged. So it's really important that this base layer of paper is comprehensive in its coverage. I sound like in a health insurance ad, but I do. I want to make sure that the coverage with the paper is solid and that it adheres really well to the canvas because I want you to think of this like a sandwich, right? You have the canvas, then you have many layers of paint over it. That whole background, if you recall, we did many, many layers of paint. So all that paint's working to protect the canvas. Then we have matte medium going down inside the oyster. Then we have paper on top of that matte medium and more matte medium on top of it. And that, if you just imagine that as a sandwich, that's a lot of protection for the canvas. So I can do some quote unquote scarier things later and feel reasonably confident that everything will be okay with the canvas. And we'll see how that develops in other videos. But for right now, I just wanted to say this. When working on canvas, when working this large, I want to ensure that the base layers are solid, like that they're secure. I don't want to have to worry about if I decide to scrape back something later that paper is going to tear off or that the canvas is going to get damaged, okay? So I'm going to take a break for a second from the collaging because wet on wet on wet on wet, if you start working it too much, you have the potential of pulling some of that paper up. So I'm going to let it set for a little bit, and I'm going to take my beloved Super Pearl Gold, which is made by Nova Paints, and I will link to all the materials that I'm using in the description below. And if you have a tough time getting the description because you you're watching on your TV, just let me know and I'll tell you how to get it. You just hit the ... more in the description on another device and you can pull up all these materials. But anyway, this is the Super Pearl Gold, and what I want to do right now is I want to use it on the outside shell, the outside lip of the shell, of the oyster shell, excuse me. Again, there's a couple reasons why I want to do this. One, the Super Pearl Gold creates an iridescence that is just magic. I say it every time I use it, but it is. It's just magic. Now, it is a bit opaque going on right now, so I'm hitting it with some just plain water in a continuous spray bottle and feathering it out. I don't want the look of iridescence or gold to be the final thing that you see on the outside shell. This is actually just the beginning of this shell, but I want to create a difference between the shell and the meat of the oyster while I'm doing the collaging today, right? I don't want there to be runoff. I don't want there to be any confusion. But also, because of this iridescent quality, and you might be able to see it right now over the darker edges of the oyster, it creates this quality of texture where there is no texture. It's just the way the light hits it. And you'll see it, you might be able to see it better from a different angle. And in a little bit, you will see a different angle to see it. But all I'm doing is setting the stage for the outside of the shell, and I'm going to call it the lip of the shell, the part of the shell that the meat rests on. I want that to have a different look. And so what I suspect will happen is that when I get to the stage of collaging the shell itself, I'm probably going to use a lot of transparent papers, okay? And I'm going to let the natural colors that are underneath the shell right now from creating the background mixed with the coverage from the Super Pearl Gold. I'm going to let that kind of be the star and then just go over it with some super sheer translucent papers that will just enhance it so it's natural looking and not contrived. I mean, right now it might look contrived, but we are so far away from the finish on this. We have lots of time to work it out. And I could change my mind about how I want to achieve that. This is not intended to be a completely collaged project. Collage is the main medium in this project. Um, but I'm not afraid to use paints or oil pastels or Stabilo woodies even. I'm not afraid to use any of that in this collage, and I'm not going to limit myself to only paper just because it's a collage project. It's a mixed media project with a heavy emphasis on collage. Let's just go with that. That sounds pretty good. All right, as the Super Pearl Gold is drying, you can see what I'm talking about over on the left-hand side with the edge of the shell. It actually looks like it's textured, like shell texture, right? Um, it's not. That is just that Super Pearl Gold doing its job. I really wish Nova knew about me and knew how much I love this product. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. Now, you might also be getting the fact that the size of this oyster is so large. I mean, I look tiny next to it. I mean, not tiny, you know what I'm saying. The size of this oyster creates an endurance situation. So I don't think any of you have ever seen me sitting on a stool while working in my studio. And that's because I don't. I don't. I'm always standing as I'm working. Um, I have to tell you, this video, I mean, right now we're what, 25 minutes or so into this video. And in real life, without editing out all of the really repetitive stuff and all that, I've already been at work on this for an hour and a half straight without stopping. And it's exhausting. So one of the one of the techniques, quote unquote, air quotes here, one of the techniques that I really want you to be aware of if you decide to work large is you've got to take care of your body. And there's nothing wrong with having a stool. There's nothing wrong with taking breaks. I mean, you have to allow yourself to work into the size that you're working in, right? And also let that size build up your muscles as well. And I mean that figuratively as much as I mean it literally. This is not a small task. And if you watch the earlier videos in this series when I was working on the background, when I was gessoing the canvas, all of those, you saw me. I used ladders, I got up and down because overreaching at this stage in my life risks me pulling something. I don't want to pull anything. I want to keep working on this. I mean, this makes me so happy, right? Do the things that will keep your body in good shape so that you can continue on with the work. I know this sounds like, okay, Jackie, I know that. But I wonder because there's a lot of us who hunch over our tables instead of, getting a proper sized stool. Or we always stand up, we never sit down, and our feet and our legs are killing us at the end of the day. Our art shouldn't be killing us, right? I mean, emotionally it does sometimes, but it shouldn't physically be hurting us. So take breaks, sit down if you need to. Um, Part of this for me is very functional. The sitting down, it's not just relief for my legs or my feet. It's because this oyster is so large that for me to collage these lower areas, I would have to be bent over, and if I were bent over doing that for an hour and a half, this video would have been spread out over 18 weeks because my back can't take that, right? And I know that about myself, and so I set up a scenario here to make that work for me. I encourage you to do the same. Take care of your body because your creativity can last you a lifetime, but if you can't do it because you hurt your body doing it, then that's a tragedy. All right, soapbox over, me stepping off. This, by the way, this paper here is, oh, this is wet strength tissue paper. And this was actually a gel print that I did on it, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And I've been holding this giant piece of wet strength tissue paper all this time. I haven't used it. I didn't know what I was going to use it for. I'm not exactly sure why I'm doing blue in this section, but I am. I'm not worried about it. Again, this is base layer. But let me tell you about this paper. What strength tissue paper is genius. And even though right now all the paints I have on it are opaque, wet strength tissue paper is a genius paper to use when you want to create translucency. Now, it's the paper itself is translucent. And when you get it wet using the techniques that I use to create transparency and translucency, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but when you do that technique, the best that you can get from wet strength tissue paper is translucency, gorgeous translucency, but not transparency. So when you are formulating which papers will go down and in which order, that is something to consider. Now, ordinarily, I try to use more translucent paints on my wet strength tissue paper because I always want to give myself the translucency option. Today, this piece of paper that I'm working on right now is opaque paint. So I know no matter what I do, it's not going to be transparent or translucent, and I'm just fine with that. I'm just bringing that up. But the real thing, that's a long introduction to wet strength tissue paper, but what I really wanted to talk to you about the wet strength tissue paper is that it is one directional. Maybe it's unidirectional. I don't know what they call it. But that means it tears very easily in one direction. And in other directions, you have to fight it. You actually have to fight it. And in a little bit, I'll show you, actually, I can show you the technique that I do for that on this piece of paper that I'm working on right now. I want to show you how you can tear the way that you want to tear with a singular directional tearing paper like wet strength tissue paper, okay? What you have to do is you have to tear in teeny tiny little increments. You'll get the shape that you want, but it's got to be teeny tiny little tears to create that shape. Or, of course, you could always cut it, but again, I'm not cutting today. So I'm going to right here, I wonder if you can see this. I should zoom in a bit more. So what I just did was I sprayed it with some water, and the water softens up the fibers just enough for me to be able to tear it with accuracy. Okay. So that was the technique. Take teeny tiny little tears. That will usually work. If it doesn't work for you, go ahead and spray the paper with water, just plain water. It's going to soften the fibers and you'll be able to tear very easily. Okay. When I do that again later, I'll try to zoom in so you can see exactly what I did and what I'm talking about. This little piece. This is the magic of editing. It's going to seem like it only took me a few seconds to get that on there. That piece fought me so hard. I swear I probably spent 5 minutes just on that little piece of orange that's going in right in that corner. But you know what? The fight was worth it. Almost worth it. The fight was worth it because not only did I get the shape that I wanted right there, but you can see all the way down to that smeary graphite underneath. and it's adding just a gorgeous element of depth for this particular area of the oyster. I love that. Absolutely love it. Who knows if we'll actually see that in the final piece, but I love knowing that it's there. I will remember that it's there, and it gives me ideas for future projects. Like, imagine doing transparent papers, just faintly painted or brightly painted, transparent papers with transparent paints on it, going over that smeared graphite. Oh my gosh, the possibilities are just unlimited. Mm, think about it. Really, I mean it. Think about it. It's pretty exciting. Now you'll also find as you're tearing off pieces of any given pieces of paper and you're trying to get, a specific shape, what you're leaving behind is what I'm just going to call a ghost shape, right? And you can use that ghost shape usually somewhere else in your collage, like I just did here, right? So that rounded part at top was actually created out of the bottom of the piece of paper that's already adhered to on the this part of the oyster, right? So that ghost shape you can use typically. It'll fit somewhere in your collage, and I love that. It makes the work of the tearing easier. I don't mind the tearing, but I am conscious of the fact that it's very time consuming. And just like newsprint, wet strength tissue paper has a tendency to buckle and, wrinkle because of the wet medium below it. So just like newsprint, you really need to work it to get out those wrinkles. Mm, But I gotta tell you, it's so satisfying when you do. I mean it. It really is. And just doing some. Ooh, I'm gonna call it fussy tearing. Instead of fussy cutting, I'm gonna call it fussy tearing. That's what that technique is called, fussy tearing. I think I'm coining that. I've never heard it before, but it could be out there in the world. You all will let me know if it's out there in the world, but I like it. Fussy tearing. Now, the truth is, I wouldn't want to fussy tear every single piece of paper on this entire collage. I mean, that really would be too much, and it would not be enjoyable for me. I don't think it would be enjoyable for anyone. Um, so I would not set myself up for that. Uh, Other papers, like, for example, the medical exam paper, oh my gosh, that tears so beautifully. The crepe style medical exam paper, which is the medical exam paper that I use. And I know for those of you in other places in the world where it's very challenging to get your hands on the medical exam paper, I apologize in advance. But you do have other options. You could use tissue paper. You have other options, but crepe style medical exam paper is a unicorn, and that's all I can say about it. It's a unicorn, and it tears beautifully in every direction. It goes completely transparent when you use the wet on wet on wet technique, and when it dries, it's gorgeous. Like all these other papers, it does buckle and wrinkle a little bit. You have to work it to get it smooth, but oh my gosh, it is spectacular. Um, and honestly, if I had really, really, really excessively pre-planned this project, which some of you will think that I did do that, but I could have been much worse, maybe I would have created all the papers for this collage on medical exam paper, except, oh gosh darn it, I hate it when I drop these little pieces. They just disappear. Oop, but I found it. Anyway, what I was going to say is that using all of the exact same papers on this collage, I don't think would give me that feeling that I'm looking for, that kind of chunky collage, textury type torn feeling that I am seeking for these papers. Even though I would be tearing the medical exam paper, I just think that's too much of the same thing over and over and over again. And I don't know. I mean, I may try it at some point. Maybe I'll love it. But I kind of like that I'm using different types of papers. All of them are going to create a different look. Now here I just grabbed my Stabilo Woody. Again, the Stabilo Woody is a water-soluble crayon, and I'm just going back in to sort of highlight the edges around the areas where I put down the paper. Uh, I don't know that we'll see any of this edging work in the final oyster, and I'm not putting it in there because I want it to be seen. Again, this is trying to keep me on track while working in such a large format. Um, Before too long, we'll see papers crossing over those lines, and the lines will get blurred, like literally. And I just want to make sure that I'm giving myself the best chance toward success with this, because it would kind of stink after working this hard on all of this to have it not look right at the end because I lost an edge and I created a weird shape in a place where there shouldn't be a weird shape. Not that I have anything against weird shapes. We love all shapes. I'm just saying, trying to keep it in line. And what you see me doing here is a modified version of last week's technique, or a couple weeks ago, where I have some matte medium on the edge of my silicone paint shaper, and I'm just going directly over the Stabilo Woody marks that I just put down to make sure that they're set with the medium so that they don't go inappropriately smeary. All right. And it did just go a little inappropriately smeary, so I took that piece of towel and wiped it down a little. I'm not ready for these like final details to be the feature. I really want the paper to be the feature right now, right? And it's getting there. I'm I'm getting pretty happy with it. I'm going to stand back and take a look for a second. And again, that's one of those things. It's really important to do that because you could be terribly wrong about where you've gone with your collage. There's something, I don't know. There's something. I think I'm just going to start putting some papers up on this upper lobe of the oyster meat. There's something that I can't quite identify yet that has me a little bothered, and um, I'm just going to continue to try to work through it. Here I am doing a little bit of that fussy tearing, right? Because this is the wet strength tissue paper. And you can see it tore a super clean line in one direction. And then the actual edging of the oyster, I'm having to be finicky with it. But what I'm going to do is I want it to go a little more transparent than it is now. It won't go transparent, it'll get more translucent. So this is the technique. I'm spraying it with water, again, wet strength tissue paper. I'm spraying both sides with water so it's nice and wet. And again, the reason why I'm doing this is because this particular piece of paper, the paint on it is super sheer. And so I'm just giving it the best opportunity to highlight what's below it and feature what's on top of it. Okay, so have the paper nice and wet. I went ahead and put down the matte medium. And I'm stretching out. Now, this is actually a pretty large piece of paper to be putting down at one time. And all that means is I need to be careful. Oh my God. Oh, it looks so good. I just want to be really careful uh, to get all the wrinkles out and all of any bubbles or anything underneath it. Um, the larger the piece of paper you're collaging on, the higher the probability of technical errors happening. And in this case, I'm considering air bubbles or wrinkles underneath a technical error. Is it going to ruin the whole piece? No, it's not. Um, but again, as I said earlier, I really want the lower layers of this particular piece to be as stable as possible. Don't forget, when this is all done, it is going to have to be stretched, right? It's going to have to be stretched on a frame or, I mean, maybe there's other options, but it's likely it will be stretched. So I definitely want to make sure everything that's from the bottom up is as stable as possible. Okay, so now that was a piece of paper that I worked on earlier that was gorgeous. That's on medical exam paper, and that could go in here in this section and just be stunning. I don't think I'm going to get to that today, but this this particular piece of paper that I keep tearing up and putting onto this part of the oyster is dreamy, absolutely dreamy. And that was just using really, really wet fluid acrylic paints on wet strength tissue paper and spraying the heck out of it with a combination of uh, water, spraying with water, but then also drizzling airbrush medium over that. Now, if you don't know this technique, using airbrush medium is a great way to make your acrylic paints thinner and more transparent without losing pigment integrity, which is really important. Okay. I have plenty of videos on that. I'll link to at least one in the description below so you can check out that technique because it's brilliant. All right. Um, there's a tear in this piece of paper, which, no big deal. It'll get collaged over to some extent, but I just wanted to patch it. And you can see with the wet strength tissue paper, that patch just totally disappeared right into the paper and the canvas. And this is why I love working with this stuff. But I gotta say, it's right about here when I realize what's been going on. And as much as I absolutely love the look of this paper up here, I realize I've made a big mistake. And that big mistake is I'm using gorgeous papers, gorgeous translucent, transparent papers on the base coat. And these papers were actually meant to be used in the final thing. So if you watched last week's video, you know that I went back and made more translucent papers, but I've got to stop for today because this has been a long day. So I hope you enjoyed these techniques, and this is what I would watch next.